Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Harmon. I live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and my play is Good Grief. Yeah, well, so I come from a big background of art, music, acting, directing, but I never really thought about playwriting until 2019. Um, my mother passed away. I know this is like a part intro, but this is literally what happened, right? And I had a lot of like emotion that went with that, right? And I didn't know how to like kind of alleviate some of it. So I started seeing a therapist, and she suggested started to write, right? And I was like, well, yeah, like that's something interesting. I've been acting and doing music, but I never felt that through my acting and music that I was able to convey what I really wanted to say, right? Because I was feeling so many emotions at once, like anger and confusion and immense amount of grief. And, you know, I started to write a play, and the play was called Eden. This was 2019. And I just started like writing about these characters in my mind that I had, right? And that's the Eden is about a college professor who deals with grief of his own here in New York. And it just started pouring out all these characters that I wanted, right? And then after about 6 months of writing it, I felt way better than I felt before. It was kind of like I used all the emotions to put into these characters. And from that, I started sharing the play with some of my friends in the acting world and theater, and they were like, "This is pretty good." And I was like, "Wait, really? Doesn't sound crazy?" Because I just thought it was like just a bunch of emotions, right? But that's essentially what a lot of plays in theater are, right? It's just human interactions throughout whatever we're going through. Yeah, there's so many. August Wilson, of course, is a big influence of mine. I feel like too, like the way he's able to bridge, like, it's like the thing about a playwright is that you're writing from your own understanding of everything, your own perception, right? And that's what makes playwriting so interesting because there's really no such thing as like a great playwright or a bad playwright, in my opinion. There's a prolific playwright, but it's like playwriting and writing or being an artist is your own perception, which no one can ever do, right? And that's what makes it so interesting because we are looking at the same thing, but through our own eyes. And August Wilson to me is someone who does that so well, right? Right, like he puts in a lot of history of being a Black person in this country, and like there's also like a lot of like Gothic themes and spirituality and all. And reading him really helped me realize that, you know what, I can talk about my life as real as it is, as crazy as it is, and there's going to be people who identify with that. So when it comes to playwriting, he's a big one that I really love. And then as far as artists, there's just so many. Like I'm inspired by musicians from Stevie Wonder to Marvin Gaye, um, Beyonce. I'm inspired by everything. I'm inspired by my partner, inspired by my dog. Like I feel like you can really be inspired by anything, right? And with playwriting, it's like I can see like a lady walking across the street and just envision a whole story behind that, and it develops into a play, right? Yeah, it's actually something I kind of got chills when you asked that question because I've been thinking about this so deeply of like how like I love writing stories about um like the forgotten people or forgotten situations, right? That no one really wants to talk about, right? About like, I hate using the term like middle class or like simple people because I think, some of those people are the most interesting people in the world, right? The people who like may seem more humble, right? But they actually have the most interesting story, and like their silence or their calmness is actually like from their maturity, right, of dealing with things, right? So I really like pulling the lens back behind people.
A weekly meeting of grieving husbands turns into an unexpected friendship. Humor, fellowship, and simply having someone to talk to and empathize with may very well be the cure to grief. And if it's not the cure, then it's a very effective treatment. And so, when speaking of grief, how does the genre of comedy or comedic moments in the darkness of grief lend to this topic to shine through?
I think that like grief is such a phenomenon, right? That like everyone goes through, right? and it's not a popular subject, right? It's like kind of like you have a funeral, it's over, everyone moves on, right? But the phenomenon of that individual, it stays with you, right? Forever. And it could be in the most simple way of like, for me, like going to lunch and being like, oh, I can't call my mother on my lunch. That's a huge, you know, situation where it affects me, right? And a lot of people go through that, right? But what I found from my own experience was that fellowship, right? Talking about that with other people, laughter, right? Realizing that we all go through this and it doesn't have to be a scary part of life. It could just be a part of life,
Mhm.
right? And actually something beautiful comes from it. So that's one part of it. And then as far as humor, I think it's kind of just remembering that person or those situations, right? And the good times that brings a lot of good emotion and feelings and laughter, right? Like sometimes I remember people who have lost or situations in the past, and I reflect on that, and it makes me happy. And the fact that you have those memories, and those memories will last forever, right? And you can share those with people. And it's kind of similar to like I think as you all know, like when people go to funerals, sometimes they like laugh. It's actually like a party or a celebration, right? And I think my play is kind of based on that, where it's like these three guys, they come into this session and of course it's a lot of sadness, but then they start remembering all the funny things for their wives or or reflecting on their puppy and like those good times that last forever and they're just as equal as the sadness of losing someone.
Elaborating on that, Marcus, great segue. Was there a specific purpose in focusing the story in three male presenting characters as sort of the subjects of the grief in terms of them being in therapy?
Yeah. I think for me, they're kind of all parts of how I feel, right? Of like when I was writing it, of like different parts. So there's like one character, right, who's like a little more hardened, a little bitter, right? Another character who is a little more goofy, a little playful, and then one who's just overly sensitive about it all, right? And I think that a lot of men may not feel the need to get help with grief. That's really big in society, right? And one thing I love about the time we live in now, we're like therapy and like getting help and mental wellness is such a big part of culture that hasn't always been there, right? A stigma, especially for like Black men and other diverse groups, it still is a stigma, right? Which is like, what? You just got to pray about it. It's like there's a lot more work that has to go into there, and being physically fit is just as important as being mentally fit. So I felt like I wanted to highlight that and the bravery of anyone who steps into therapy. I love too that like, I have my 9 to 5, having a conversation with people about, oh yeah, I have a therapist. I think that should be the norm to say. I think that's great, right? And I feel like the younger generations are definitely breaking that stigma, where people don't talk about it or aren't brave to talk about it. That line is one of the most important parts. It's amazing that you picked that one, because that is how I felt, right? Where like I was, and I'm getting very personal here, but I'm sure that people can identify with it, right? Where it's like I was extremely close to my mother, very, very close, maybe too close, right? And I think like me as a Black gay man, my mother was like my everything, my light, my safety, right? And I think that I can speak for other Black gay men where that's the reality for them, right? And everyone, right? Who doesn't love their mom? So for me, it was like that was a big fear that I had of like, wow, I had this person so close to me for decades, and then like that, they're not here. Like, what if I forget them? Django, what if I forget them? And it was a sincere fear that I had. And I was like, wow, you know what? Like, I bet I'm not the only one who felt like that. So when Andrew talking about his wife, like, um, very similar, right? Like that has to be your biggest fear. Like if you move on, right? And day by day, you naturally, as humans, we're naturally resilient, right? We can easily like make ourselves get up and get to work and go on a date and meet somebody else or like move on, right? But then there is that fear of like, oh wow, I don't want to forget this person and what they meant to me in my life. And for Andrew, that's what he was touching on, of like he didn't want to forget all these beautiful memories, and holding on to that grief and that sadness is a way of not doing that. But his wife would want him. I'm sure my mom would want me. I'm sure anyone that we've lost would want us to put our shoulders back and go for it and share that love that they've given us to others, or those lessons, or that humor that they've given us to others. Where it's like she's friends with them, right? She makes them feel that they are safe to say whatever they want. And she also keeps everything under control, right? There's a sense of like respect and like making sure that no one goes too far. Um, and I think too that like her as a therapist also just represents anyone in your life that you can speak to and feel safe. And there's a safe space to know that, hey, no matter how I'm feeling, no matter what I'm saying, if I feel that it's crazy or too far, you know that you're around somebody who can understand it and receive it in a way that they're gonna they're just going to know where you're coming from in that moment.
Mhm.
And that's what she's kind of a representation of that safe space to be yourself and to grieve how you want, and to say what you want.
Right. And speaking of safe spaces, that Mary does make a safe space for this character who comes in at the end, Sebastian, and who we find out towards the end that he is not actually grieving his wife, but is grieving his dog that had passed away. And we would love to hear more about your thought process behind this twist and like how this character shapes the end of the story.
Yeah, it's so funny because before I wrote that, I didn't even have a dog. I wrote this play like, yeah, I started writing this play like maybe a year and a half ago, but I finished it maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago. I finished it, but now I have a dog, and now it's even more so beautiful, that ending of the story, right? And I think it just shows how like grief is different to everyone but similar to everyone, right? And it's like having an animal now, that love is so beautiful, right? And there's a lot of similarities of love between humans. um so there's that. And then it's also, I just thought it would be like really cute and funny that this young man is kind of breaking the seriousness of the moment
Mm.
and like a bit lighthearted, right? A lot of my plays that deal with grief or like some drama, I do like there to be a lighthearted moment, because we still need those moments to kind of bring us down to reality, right? And so that's where that kind of fits in there, where it's like, yes, Sebastian is dealing with this immense grief. Oh, it's his puppy. He misses his puppy. He's licking his toes or stealing his food under the table, Um, but that grief is just as genuine, it's just as real as Honor and Andrews, right? And that's the part that I wanted to bring up, where it's like, in a weird way, it's like it's just another part that makes us all human and that connects us. Um, Even though we're all so different, it's crazy that we all deal with the same BS and have these same emotions, right? And that's kind of beautiful when you think about it. And that's part of the play where it's like three different scenarios. Yes, Andrew and Honors is similar. Here's this guy, and then they're bonded through this shared emotion that they are going through. It's very, very similar, right? The anger, the confusion, the why. Why is this happening to me? The loss. But then now they have each other, and now a new journey starts. Yeah, I like to end all my plays in a hopeful note. Yeah, I always will do that. I mean, maybe something will change. Who knows what I'm going through 10 years from now? But I've written many works now, and I always want to end them, because I feel like life, even through my darkest times in life, there's always been some grace there, whether that's to God or the universe or people. There's always something to be like, not too far. Remember, this is just one chapter of a long story.